Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's live stream. My name is Mike Mimoso, and joining me in a minute will be Team 82 researcher Vera Mens. We are going to discuss research that Vera published a couple of weeks ago on Akuvox's E11 Smart Intercoms. These devices are very popular worldwide, and they're used to control access to offices, residential buildings, commercial establishments, and they have many other applications as well. These devices, as we learned, also pose very typical IoT security challenges. We're going to talk to Vera about her work. We're focus on the 13 vulnerabilities she uncovered in her research into these devices, and also cover what was a very challenging disclosure with the vendor. So let's get started and bring in Vera. How are you? Nice to see
Hello,
you.
Mike. Nice to see you too.
So let's get started. Just kind of bring me in. How did it happen that you ended up researching, one of these door phone devices? It's not a typical Team 82 research project. You guys are usually looking at OT devices, PLCs, the like. How'd you end up on a smart intercom?
So, actually, we always try to expand our portfolio. And at the last 2 years, I think, we did a lot of research on IoT devices and medical devices. And actually, last year, we did research on a door phone very similar to this one. So, it was very natural for us
Mhm.
to go this road. It seems that the device is popular and the research on it will have an impact, and an impact is what we are looking for usually.
Right. So bring me into your methodology when you research something like this, because you can't necessarily research, a door that's in use, a door device that's in use. You need to order a device, emulate it offline. Give me a little bit of detail on how you went about this.
So we are actually not always by devices we research, but in this case, we need a real device, so will be able to unlock all the possibilities the device can offer and to explore the whole attack surface. So we did order a real one on eBay, but it took so long for it to arrive, and we started to see if we can start our research before the device is here, and it was pretty easy. We found the firmware that was uploaded online on Akuvox website. It wasn't encrypted, and we could just download it and start to review it right away. Of course, the embedded devices, as many others, and also this door phone is ARM-based architecture, so we couldn't just run it on our computers. And luckily for us, we have always some Raspberry Pi, which has an ARM-based CPU. So we just copied the binary files from the firmware to the Raspberry Pi, and we could start to emulate the device. And this is how we started to look for vulnerabilities long before we had an actual device.
Raspberry Pi is a lifesaver, isn't it, for you guys?
Yeah, we do emulate a lot of firmwares with it, and I think it's my fifth project or maybe sixth that I have a Raspberry Pi put on it, which is quite hard to get nowadays, to be frank.
So let's talk about some of the maybe the more serious vulnerabilities that you found. You found 13 in all, um, each with some different outcomes, some different severity. But let's talk about some of the more serious ones, and if you can also explain some of the risks that were involved. That some of these vulnerabilities pose to users.
Yeah. So you're right. Not all of the vulnerabilities we have found have a great impact, but we did found some that did a major impact on the ecosystem of Aquavox. To start with local vectors, those are the situation when an attacker or some user already within the network. So we have found three major vulnerabilities, which is authentication bypass to main web interface. The main web interface is the one that can control the Akuvox door phone, open the doors, view logs, view photos of whoever comes into the building, and there is a lot of sensitive information on it. And to bypass the authentication on such service can have an impact. Another one is that was pretty serious is what can we do once we have already been authenticated to the server, and we found some command injection vulnerabilities that led to arbitrary code execution, which means that this advisory, this adversary can just run an arbitrary code on the device, and it can be just a door to the whole network for execution. There is another proprietary protocol that Aquos have developed, um, and it has like command execution command by design without any authentication. And we were surprised to see something like that because there was no authentication whatsoever. It just you send a command you want to run with proprietary protocol, and it's just been executed. So that's pretty serious
Yeah.
for for devices like that. But it's still the local attack surface, and the attacker should be within the network already, uh, which is a lot. But still, those a lot of those devices are publicly accessible. We saw them on Shodan or some other services, like something like 5,000 devices were publicly accessible from public network, and those vulnerabilities are relevant for them as well. So this is pretty serious. In addition to that, there is a remote attack surface. What can we do to devices that we have no connection to? And we found two serious vulnerabilities. One of them will be the FTP one. If you read the news, the blog, you saw that it has, we did emphasize it pretty well. So mainly it says that everyone that enters the door or moves and the door phone takes a picture and upload this to one server, and with one hard-coded password, and everyone with the password can just go to the server and download all the pictures from any Akuvox in the world. And this was pretty serious, and we were shocked when we saw that. Another one was the SIP vulnerability. SIP is just VoIP service for one device to call another or multiple others, and there is a SIP server that should manage the access control. And we discovered that there is no access control and there is no restriction from one device to call any other Akuvox device, regardless its owner. So if I'm an attacker, I can buy an Akuvox device for a rather cheap price and just call someone's Akuvox device and just open the microphone and the camera on the device, just to force it. And there is nothing for the other side to do about it. So this is a pretty serious privacy issue.
Yeah, and I mean the FTP vulnerability and the SIP one are just unbelievable. Just the implications, obviously, depending on where the device is installed. You've got
Sure.
privacy issues, personal safety issues. There's a lot coming from this work. So it's amazing that you found these vulnerabilities. Just what does it say about the security processes of the vendor? I mean, are these typical issues for IoT devices? Are these things that you see normally in terms of, there may not be a lot of security testing on some of these devices in general?
I think that the industry is improving, but there is still a long way to go, especially in IoT devices, especially uh, devices that are not committed to security in their portfolio. And there are sure some holes in their CI/CD cycle. It seems that no security audit is happening, no penetration testing, because those vulnerabilities were pretty obvious. And FTP, for example, is very old protocol. I think something somewhere in the 17th. And it's not that common that someone would use this protocol nowadays.
Right.
So it seems that the focus on security was surely lacking in their development cycle. And I hope that this report and from my researcher colleagues will push those vendors to look at security issues and understand how important they are, and it's must to be taken care of.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, the disclosure process wasn't very smooth with this vendor. I don't know how much you want to share with us, but there's a timeline in the report of just, this began in January 22 with Team 82 attempting to contact the vendor with the research. Maybe Vera, you can kind of share a little bit about just the back and forth, and we should say that they have finally confirmed that these vulnerabilities exist and are working on a fix, which is obviously a win in this case.
Yes, for sure. Indeed, the disclosure process was difficult. It took more than a year. We did disclose the vulnerabilities as soon as we have found them, and we didn't hear from the vendor, and our tickets were closed after we did open them again. Um, After some time, for not being able to contact the vendor, we did contact the ICS CERT, and they did try to contact Akuvox as well, without success. And they did issue the advisories and the CVs numbers, as they understood that the public has to be able to guard itself somehow, either it's by segmenting the device or removing the device whatsoever. Um, and that's what they did. After the publication, it's like a couple of weeks ago, Akuvox did contact us and said that they didn't get uh, any disclosure process because it went to their spam, and that they will remediate those vulnerabilities as soon as possible. And they working as far as I know for the firmware update, and the FTP issues and the SIP issues, the serious ones, those are with greatest impact. It was fixed. It's not working anymore. So it was a relief for us as consumers of those devices, and for the security community, because it says that we did an impact. It's just right now there is serious vulnerabilities that are no longer exist, which is great news.
Yeah, it is great news. It's great when you can see a positive outcome, obviously, but from Team 82's point of view, it's important to see vendors kind of respond and work with us in a coordinated fashion, and that happens a lot. And when it doesn't, it's kind of becoming uncommon, which is, I guess, a good thing. But like,
Yeah,
what are
nowadays
some of the things
it
that
still
you
happens.
right?
It
What
still
are some of the things you would like to see vendors do to improve disclosures? And I know we've talked about like product security pages on their websites, secure email addresses. Kind of explain why all that's important.
Yeah, so right now the security report, it's not something uncommon to have. We have bounty programs from many vendors, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, that reward security researchers to provide them vulnerabilities. So of course, those are the best ways to reward a researcher on its finding. Um, and it doesn't have to go this far. If it only would be able to, in some constructive way, to report those vulnerabilities and to hear from the vendor and have a negotiation and uh, have a process to be defined. That would be awesome, and it's happening. It's we are seeing that happening every time, and vendors who doesn't have any defined way to for vulnerability remediation. We are as Claroty, as Team82, always happy to help and guide those vendors. So it is improving, but just not fast enough.
Yeah, yeah, it's still a young industry in terms of those processes, but it is getting better. So, last question, Vera. We should definitely talk about mitigations. Until Akuvox has a firmware update that's available and been tested and confirmed that it works, I think it's important that organizations that do have these devices installed have some advice in terms of mitigations. It's not always feasible to just rip these things out. It's,
Yeah.
so, what are your recommendations in terms of temporarily kind of blunting the impact of these vulnerabilities?
So first of all, Akuvox, they will issue an update, a new firmware without those vulnerabilities, and anyone with those devices should be up to date and look for this update. It should come any day now, I think. About the devices that already is that can be for some reason be updated or just up until the update arrives. It is always important to know what attack vectors the device exposed to. So if your device, for example, can be found on services like Shodan on Census, you should seriously to consider to remove it and to put it behind some NAT service or any other solution, so the device won't be accessible from public network, which is a bad practice regardless Aquox vulnerabilities. And another thing that may help within the local network is to segment the Aquavox devices in different segments, so only specific endpoints will be able to contact the device and communicate with it. This way, even if there is another new vulnerability of command injections that can lead to remote code execution, the attacker won't able to do it because he just doesn't have any way to communicate with this device. And as from apart from the main administrator, there is no need for anyone to be able to do that anyway.
Right.
So no, nothing is missed here. And of course, the password for the interfaces, for the web interface, must be changed from the admin default one. So even after the update will come, still to bypass the authentication with default password is pretty common. So one should avoid that, of course.
Great. Excellent advice. All right, Vera, thank you so much for joining me today. I think this is an important conversation, and congratulations on the good work. Keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.